Alrighty, we're back. I guess I'll try and make this a little straighter. I know some people apparently have issues when YouTubers have their camera off kilter. We're back with Outlier by Lisa Beeson, chapter 19. And we're just going to get right into it. As winter slowly merged into spring, Kale had taken Ari and Cam to Budapest, Madrid, and Tokyo in hopes of finding more stones. Ari had always dreamed of traveling the world and going to places such as these, but there hadn't been any time for sightseeing. They only stayed long enough for Ari to be sure the stones weren't there before they set off again, so they could keep a low profile. The strain of all the false leads was taking its toll on Ari. She felt like she was letting Kale down, and that maybe the San Cristobal stone had just been beginner's luck. She hoped this trip to Heidelberg, Germany would be different. Before Kale had taken the stone from the Nazi in Brazil, he had mentioned that he wasn't the only one who had absconded with one of the high priest's stones. Kale had finally been able to track this other man, who had wisely changed his name after the war, down to Copenhagen, only to find out that he had recently died. His collection of old rare books was split up between his children, and one of his sons sold off his inheritance to help pay off the mountain of debt he was under. Kale managed to find a copy of the catalog. Upon skimming through it, one book in particular, rumored to have a strange purple stone attached to its cover, caught its attention. The Nazi had hidden his ill-gotten gains in plain sight by attaching it to the cover of an old forgotten nobleman's journal. The details of the sale of the book had been confidential, but Kale was confident that he had tracked the buyer of the book down to Heidelberg. Kale, Cam, and Ari walked down the pedestrian thoroughfare of Hauptstrasse, blending in with the throng of tourists brought out by the beautiful sunny May afternoon. Ari was enjoying the sights and smells and watching all the street performers and artists as she and Cam alternated grabbing handfuls of gummy bears from the large bag they had bought from an adorable little candy shop. Reed and Tober were keeping a slight distance behind them as they made their way through the old medieval part of town that was filled with an interesting mix of old and new, shadowed by the Heidelberg Castle, looking down on them from its perch on a high hill above the city. The day before, Ari had covertly searched for the stone at the residence of Frau Hertz, who was renowned in Heidelberg for being an avid collector of rare books, while Kale distracted the old woman with friendly conversation. When Ari had come up with nothing, Kale cajoled Frau Hertz into giving them the names of a few rare bookstores in the area that she knew were most likely to have purchased the journal. They were now headed for the first store on the list. Kale led them away from the crowds, down some shadowy back roads, past shops and cafes that only people familiar with the area seemed to congregate in. He turned back to Reed and Tober and motioned his head towards a pub with an outside sitting area. And without a word, they moved towards one of the tables. Then he took the almost empty bag of gummy bears out of Ari's hand and shoved it into Cam's, causing her to pull out her bottom lip into a pout. He told Cam to go sit with Reed and Tober as he put his hand on her back and guided her across the street towards the ancient-looking bookstore. "They don't allow that junk in a place like this," he said as he escorted her inside. The tinkling bells attached to a string above the door announced their entrance. "Now, go do your thing," he whispered into her ear, lightly nudging her forward. Normally, Ari loved bookstores, but this place was dark and musty with the smell of the old dusty tomes that cluttered almost every nook and cranny. As Ari walked further into the store, she became aware of a hunched old man with white, wispy hair sitting behind the vintage glass and mahogany counter. Shrewdly scrutinizing her behind his large, myopic glasses that made him look like a tousled old owl, Ari guessed he was probably wondering what a teenage girl dressed in a gray knit beanie, hooded sweatshirt, various wrist accessories, and worn jeans with shredded knees was doing wandering around his hollowed establishment. She smiled warmly at him and said with her best German accent, "Guten Tag." Guten Tag, he said with the tip of his head. Is there something I can help you with, young lady? I don't know a German accent. Okay. More accents getting butchered. I guess I'm pretty well stuck with the Irish and the Scottish in my head. Is there something I can help you with, young lady? He asked in German, taking her for a native. No, thank you. I'm just browsing while my father is looking around, she answered back in German, and gestured towards Cale, who was pretending to be interested in some books by the back entrance. The man squinted over at Cale, taking in his rich, polished appearance, with his tattoos covered up by his sleeves and collar of his coat, and was mollified. All right, but please be careful. These books are very old. I will, she assured him with an innocent smile. She aimlessly wandered around a bit until she could duck behind a corner, away from the old man's scrutiny. Then she closed her eyes and tried to feel for the stone. Cale, not wanting to draw undue attention to the book or themselves, didn't want to ask about the book unless they were absolutely sure it was there. She pushed out her field of awareness around her and throughout the bookstore. Then she felt it. Yes! Freaking finally! Well, fina freaking lily. Fina freakingly. Really? She celebrated as she punched her arm up in triumph. It was hard to keep herself from skipping through the stacks back over to Cale, but she managed what she hoped looked like a confident strut. She sidled up next to him and whispered, It's here, Cale. He has it in the back. His eyes eagerly cut over to hers, and she couldn't help the grin spreading across her face. It had been months since she had found the other stone, and it felt good not to disappoint him. He pulled her into his side and quickly kissed her head. Then he casually strolled over to the counter, with Ari trailing behind. Hallo, he said to the old man with a polite smile. Guten Tag, can I help you, sir? He said, smiling back at him. Yes, I hope you can, he said in perfect German. I've been looking for the journal of a late 16th century nobleman, Baron Otto von der Lichts, which has an elaborately embellished cover with a purple jewel as its centerpiece. Have you heard of it? The old man's eyes narrowed shrewdly. I may have. I can't be sure, he said evasively while taking measure of Cale's highbrow confidence in expensive clothes, figuring out just how much he could fleece him for. Cale stared back at him with a look that would intimidate even the bravest of souls. I have sources that say you are undoubtedly in possession of said book, he said in a warning tone. The old man's eyes widened and his thick glasses exaggerated them to almost cartoonish proportions. That's right. Now I remember. Yes, you must forgive an old man's faulty memory, he amended, not wanting to incur any more of Cale's displeasure. I just procured a book of that description very recently. I'm surprised word has spread so quickly, he said, as he slowly and creakily got off the high-legged chair he was sitting on, revealing just how short he actually was. But I guess in these circles it always does. It is in the back. I'll go get it, he said, and shuffled off to the back room of the store. Ari followed his progress, looking through the walls, as Cale impatiently checked his expensive watch. The old man soon shuffled back out with a rectangular bundle wrapped in a black velvet cloth. He placed it on the counter in front of them. Then, with exaggerated care, he unveiled the book and the brilliant purple stone with hidden colors that was in the center of the almost garishly decorated leather cover. Cale schooled his features, but Ari could almost feel the excitement coming off of him. There was only one stone left to find. He nodded to the old man, who put on some white gloves and carefully opened the cover to show off the neatly scrawled pages of the nobleman's memoir. Cale pretended to be interested for about a minute before he asked, How much? The old man began to hem and haw over what a priceless artifact like this should cost, and they began to haggle back and forth. Ari had absolutely no interest in this part. She'd done what she was supposed to do, so she casually touched the back of Cale's hand that was hanging down by his side with the back of hers and made the connection. You don't need me for this. Can I go hang out at that music store we passed? She pushed an image of the store and where it was into his mind. His head moved in an almost imperceptible nod, so she quickly left the bookstore and dashed across the street to the table Reed, Tober, and Cam were sitting at, drinking beer and eating pub food. In Germany, Cam was legally old enough to drink, so he was taking full advantage. She grinned as they looked at her expectantly and gave them an enthusiastic thumbs up. They all cheered and clinked their beer steins together. "Good job, Pipes," Cam said after another swig from his beer. "Thanks," she said with a smirk. Kayla's still inside haggling with that crook of a bookstore owner. "He said I could go check out that music store he passed while we wait. You want to come with?" she asked as she snatched a couple of his french fries and then shoved them into her mouth. "Sure, why not?" he said with a shrug, chugged down the rest of his beer, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and got up to follow her. "We'll just be on the next street over," she called over to her shoulder to Reed and Tober as they walked down the street. The music store was a hole-in-the-wall kind of place, with poorly plastered walls pasted with band posters and concert flyers. There were CDs around the outer walls, and the middle of the room was a bin after bin of both vintage and current vinyl record albums. There was a record player back in the old nursery at Artemere, so Ari went to look for something decent. As she was perusing through the bins, Cam was busy pretending to be a very dramatic DJ, making the bass drop in the dubstep song that was playing in the background, and finding hilarious old album covers to show her. There were a couple other people milling around the store that were either enjoying or ignoring Cam's antics, and the chick behind the front counter was obviously checking him out. He had let his hair grow out some on top and styled it in a way that gave him a devil-may-care look, and apparently it was working for him. While Ari was giggling at Cam's antics and looking through the selections, her scalp started to tingle when she heard the door open, and it took everything she had not to look in horror at the two shades that had walked in. She tried to fight down the involuntary spike of fear that pulsed through her when she felt their repellent auras push against her, like they had an oily physical mass. Her fear must have accidentally affected everyone in the store because they were all looking around agitatedly, their senses on high alert, like a herd of deer looking for the source of danger. Crap, crap, crap! Ari knew they had to get out of there, and fast. She discreetly kept her head down while looking around through her long lashes for Cam, and saw that he was on the other side of the room. He had been making his way towards the chick that had been checking him out, but now he was standing there looking right at the two male shades as they were slowly making their way towards the back of the store where Ari was. She had to get his attention away from the shades without drawing any more attention to herself. Grasping for ideas, she came up with one that might possibly work. While she continued to keep her head down and pretended to look through the albums, she latched onto Cam's energy. She could feel his fear, but was surprised to find that it was mostly for her. Praying this would work, she thought, "Cam, if you can hear this, don't look at me. Just scratch the back of your head 3 times. She saw him flinch in surprise, but he quickly got control and brought his hand up to scratch the back of his head 3 times. Her heart did an excited flip. "Cam, those 2 freaks that just walked in are shades, and they just felt me amp everyone's fear. We have to get out of here now." "Okay, I'll distract them. Then we'll book it out the back," he thought back at her. Then he grabbed an album cover from the bin closest to him, pretending to look at it, and then he whipped it like a high-speed frisbee, and a corner hit one of the shades smack dab in the middle of his forehead, effectively distracting them both. Then he and Ari made a dash out the back of the store to the access road behind it. Unfamiliar with the city, they quickly got lost and found themselves trapped in a dead-end alley. Just as they were about to find a way to climb up to the rooftop, Ari felt the shades right behind them. She quickly turned to face the loathsome creatures. The bodies they possessed had been 2 guys in their early 20s, but now they looked like sick, strung-out club kids who hadn't slept or bathed in a really long time. Their sinister, dark, oily auras swirled around them, and their red-rimmed irises were focused solely on her, making her freeze in fear. She grabbed onto Cam's hand, making a connection, letting him see what they were really dealing with. "Holy he started, but the shade with the green mohawk mullet hairstyle and an ugly welt forming in the middle of his forehead interrupted him. Gefurter Kinder, he mocked in a high, scratchy voice. Gefurter Kinder, he mocked in a high, scratchy voice. Der Wolf ist auf der Jagd, und wir haben ihren Geruch. You don't have to tell me, I know I butchered that. Then he smelled the air like it was the most delicious thing he had ever smelt. What did he say? Cam whispered. He said, Run quickly, children. The wolves are on the hunt, and they have our scent. She whispered back dispiritedly, knowing that it was her fear that had given them away. Come now, Haksha. They're obviously American, so let's be good hosts and speak English, said the one with short, spiky platinum hair. I've heard about you, he said, looking curiously at Ari, while Haksha was eerily tilting his head to the side and eyeing Cam, like a bird of prey looking at its next meal. The car has been looking for you, the pretty little girl who magnifies human emotion. Not so little anymore, are you? He said with a salacious sneer, as they started walking menacingly towards them, backing them further into the alley. Panicking, Ari quickly searched for Kale's energy. When she found it, he was disappointingly far away, but she latched on anyway. Kale, help! She thought to him, but she lost hold of the connection when the guy with the platinum hair held out his hand and said, Come nicely with us, girl, or I'll let Haksha punish your friend for damaging his vessel. Haksha brought out a wicked-looking switchblade and pointed it threateningly at Cam. And I must warn you, he continued, his two favorite things are drawing blood and hearing human screams. Oh, heck no. Something snapped inside of her. She didn't even think. She just sifted through the physical repulsion of the Shade's noxious auras and quickly snapped both their necks with sickening cracks. The bodies they had stolen fell at her feet, and she saw their true dark, diaphanous forms leave the broken carcasses, while making a high-pitched screeching sound like nails on a chalkboard as they fled into the shadows. Both Cam and Ari stood there in shock at what she has just done. Sweet baby Jesus, Cam breathed out slowly. They weren't people anymore, Ari tried to rationalize as her hands began to shake. She looked desperately over at Cam, needing absolution. You saw that, right? They were going to hurt you. The bile in her stomach rose up, and she couldn't hold back her nausea any longer. She quickly stumbled over to the back corner of the alley and vomited. Cam came over and held her hair back from her face. Hey, you don't have to be sorry for anything. I saw what they were. Those things were evil incarnate, he said soothingly as he rubbed her back with his other hand. You just did the world a favor. You're a superhero status right now, Pipes. They heard the pounding of running feet. Then Kale's voice called out, Ari! Before the three of them arrived at the opening of the alley, and they took in the scene in front of them. 2 dead bodies, and Ari puking up a rainbow-colored gummy bear vomit in the corner. What the bloody hell happened? Kale demanded. Ari just kicked some major demon ass, that's what, Cam answered proudly. Only after Reed and Tober discreetly disposed of the bodies, and they were well on their way back to England, did Cam and Arlie finally explain everything that had happened with the Shades. Kale told them that he had been made aware of the creatures and their pitch-black energy signatures back when he was a mercenary, and he was surrounded by war and carnage. And he was pissed that Ari was on their radar. You and me both, buddy, Ari thought as they crossed the channel. You and me both. And that was chapter 19. Whoop whoop. I'm gonna eat some of my noodles here and then go on to chapter 20. Peace.